So those are some of the deeper roots. And then moving on a bit, you have the whole thing speeded up, as it were, in the 17th, 18th, 19th centuries in Europe, in the move towards modernity. And people will know this story roughly, that basically in the 17th century, 16th, 17th century, you have a new concept of truth and science, the scientific revolution, as it used to be called, so that man and nature are separated and you have real laws and so on and so on. And you also have in Western Europe growth of urbanization and the separation of the rural and the urban, a new urban mentality. And you have a new form of production, industrialism and factories and so on and so on. Now that burst of newness from the middle of 17th or early 17th century it's indicated by the reaction which I was particularly interested in, which is the Romantic movement, because as the full implications of what was happening to our identities and our contacts with nature and with each other and so on dawned, then sensitive people, I mainly know the British Romantic movement, either the Romantic poets and writers from Blake and Wordsworth and Coleridge and Keats and Shelley, or even the Scottish ones. But also, obviously, it was happening in Germany and France a little later, because these things struck them more forcibly later, Goethe and so on, Schiller and the rest. So basically, these people were lamenting. If you read, for example, Blake's aphorisms or his famous poem, Jerusalem, this is all about, you know, the dark satanic mills and all that. So basically, we are losing touch with nature. We're losing touch with our real identities. And they lament this, and they sort of call for a return to all that. And that was the great cry of pain across Europe from the 1750s through to 1830s, 40s, and was revived with the pre-Raphaelite movement and later and Victorian doubt and uncertainty. So that bridges the gap between these very long early roots in Europe and then up to the 20th century.
And you capture that in the great Russian novels, don't you? You know, Dostoevsky and Tolstoy, they did it there, didn't they? And
yeah, absolutely.
To gain it.
I mean, the different timing is interesting, because it's first in British Romanticism, because we first had the Industrial Revolution, and the scientific revolution was rooted here too. And there's a time lag of 20, 30, 40 years. It's really after Napoleon that you get it in France. In Rousseau, I suppose, is somewhat of this kind, but a lot of the writing is early 19th century rather than mid 18th century. And Russia doesn't go through any kind of this stuff until the middle of the 19th century. And then you get this flowering of Russian literature, partly around this theme, exactly as you said.
Do we get the same thing in Japan after Fukuzawa's influence? Have they gone through this, or is that a completely different response?
I think you would. I mean, I'd have to sort of dredge my memory, but I think some of the novelists of the early 20th century are around this theme of growing loneliness, alienation, separation. I Am a Cat, and that series, and the man who committed suicide, whose name
Mishima,
and so on. You would find elements of this theme in Japanese literature.